And man, do we have a lot to unpack today. We're going to get in our Wayback Machine and talk about a show that happened 20 years ago. And this, I believe, is an interesting show to talk about because it's one that you were watching from the outside looking in just before you came back into the company. Of course, we're talking about Super Brawl 2000. It went down on February 20th at the Cow Palace in San Francisco. I guess this is technically Super Brawl 10. Somewhere along the way, you guys decided to stop numbering them like that. And this one is Super Brawl 2000. And this is much different than the Super Brawls we've seen before. For starters, it drew 5,538 paid, 3,031 comps. The Cow Palace gate here is 177 grand and only 38,000 in merchandise. These numbers are a stark contrast from when the NWO was up and running hot and heavy just a few years before.
Yeah, it's interesting. I looked at the crowd. Of course, the Cow Palace is an older building, so it's easy to make it look pretty decent. Just the way the building is configured and the lighting and so forth. The crowd looked pretty good, but that's a pretty soft number, going into this Super Brawl. No doubt about it. It's a very soft number.
Well, and WCW is reeling in a lot of ways at this time, both creative and attendance, ratings. I mean, pretty much every way a wrestling company could be hurting. That is what is going to describe WCW as we head into the year 2000 here. The Monday Night War, while still technically ongoing, it's really been over for well over a year at this point, with the WWF firmly establishing their dominance. But one of the biggest hits came just a few weeks prior to this event when the Radicals walked out. Of course, Eddie Guerrero, Dean Malenko, Perry Saturn, and the newly crowned world champion, Chris Benoit, all left WCW for the WWF. And when that happened, you weren't there, you were home. What'd you think about all these guys taking a stand and making a mass exodus like this? Really the first time that we would see not one guy jump, but a lot of guys jump, multiple guys jump.
Yeah. And I was trying when I knew we were going to do this show before I left for Qatar, and tried to, patchwork together a timeline in my memory of exactly, when I had left. Of course, I knew when I had left, but when I had come back, and more importantly, as it relates to this show, when I first really started talking seriously to Brad Siegel about possibly coming back to WCW after I was technically called paid or played, which is a legal term within the contract. But once if someone is under contract and there's a pay or play provision in that contract, once they are deemed to be paid, they don't have to play you, but you can only pull that trigger once. It's not like they could send me home, say, okay, we're going to exercise the pay or play option in your agreement. And then once that option is exercised, they can say, no, I changed my mind. We're going to bring you back to work. It was one and done. So I was technically still I was legally still under contract to WCW when I got that call from Brad Siegel. And in terms of the timing and referencing to your question in context, I was on my way home to Atlanta, actually, from Wyoming. I had my own plane at the time. And I had flown, Lori and I flew up from Atlanta, picked up my brother and sister in Minneapolis, and then we all flew together to Wyoming to watch the Super Bowl. And when I returned on that flight to Minneapolis to drop off my brother and sister, Lori and I decided to just spend the night in Minneapolis. And we went to an Applebee's or Chili's, whatever it was, near the hotel where we were staying. And they had Nitro, it was a Monday night. They had Monday Night Raw on in the restaurant where we were eating. And, I couldn't hear anything, but I was kind of watching it out of the corner of my eye and not kind of paying attention, but not really paying attention. The television monitors were far enough away where I couldn't really tell ideally what was going on anyway. And then out of the corner of my eye, I saw the reveal of when the Radicals showed up. And I stared at the television, and it was weird. It was just kind of, I don't know how to describe it. I guess it would be like, you're seeing your ex-girlfriend out with her new boyfriend, for the very first time in public or something like that. It was strange, And I must have been staring at the TV long enough that Lori said to me, she goes, what are you staring at? And I said, look at that. And of course, Lori she didn't know what was really going on. She wasn't paying close attention. And I told her, she said, "What are you thinking?" And I said, "I'll be getting a phone call soon." And the words just rolled off my tongue. I hadn't thought about it. I didn't want to get a phone call from Turner. I was in my rearview mirror. I had 2 or 2.5 years left on my contract. I was good. I wasn't thinking about anything, but the words just rolled off my tongue in an instant. And literally we got back to Atlanta probably a day or 2 days later. We took our time getting home. And sure enough, after being home for about 2 or 3 days, I got the phone call. And premonition or whatever, it was Brad Siegel asked me, in a very casual way, "What are you up to? What have you been thinking about? What are your plans for the, in a roundabout way, trying to feel me out to see if I'd be willing to come back." So that was that period of time between whenever the Super Bowl was in 2000 and probably, 10 days later, a week later, is when I probably had my first serious conversation with Brad about the possibility of coming back. So I wasn't here. I wasn't in WCW. I shouldn't say here. I wasn't in WCW for this pay-per-view. I wasn't really a part of the build-up or anything, but there were some conversations taking place right around this time.
The Super Bowl in 2000 went down on January 30th from the Georgia Dome. So everybody in Atlanta was probably on the hype train for that, but you somewhere at a casual dining restaurant knew what was coming. We should also mention that you're going to wind up landing back officially, at least on camera, in April. It's good to know that you had at least been talking about it. Let's talk a little bit about where the business had been and all of that in more recent years. We're here in January. Your average attendance in 99, in January of 99 was 8,661 fans. In February, it's 8,814 fans. Just a year later here for the pay-per-view, it's 5,538 paid. So a big decrease here in a major way. Most of the decrease, of course, happened in the second half of the year. The Nitro rating would decrease from a 4.47 average in 98, where it actually beat the WWF on average for the year, to a 3.66. So an 18% drop. But then the real serious drop happened in 99, where you fall an average of 0.93 to a 0.55. No, I'm sorry. That's with buy rates. So buy rates are going to go down 41%. Major dip. Also, the house show business down as well. You're selling out 15% of your house shows in 1999. When you compare that to 1998, roughly half, 49% were sold out. Just everywhere you look, it feels like this business is circling the drain a little bit. So it makes sense to me that the brass said, "Hey, who was running this thing when it was at its peak, and can we get him back?" We've talked a little bit about how you knew it was coming, but Lori had a unique perspective, Mrs. B, because she was there to see you during the good times and during the bad times, and just how stressed out you were and how not fun it was and how it had to affect you personally. What did she think when you got the call? Was she happy? Was it vindication? Or was she dreading that, oh man, you're going to get back into that rat race?
It certainly wasn't vindication. She wasn't happy. Neither one of us are kind of built that way. Lori's always been really supportive of anything and everything I've ever attempted to do. But she was concerned also. She did see a lot in terms of what I went through starting in late 1998 and certainly through 99 until I left the company in September of 99. And it was ugly. It was not a pretty sight. And I think she was relieved when I finally left Turner. I know I was. So I'm certain she was as well. And I think the prospect of going back was probably, I don't know. I never really talked to her about it, to be honest, but I could tell by the way she reacted to the news that I had been on the phone with Brad and so forth, that she was concerned, I think, more than anything, hoping that I made the right decision.